Before we get into today's story, welcome to Crimson Secrets. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our family. And drop a comment right now telling us what city you're watching from. We love knowing where our viewers are. Now, let's get into it. She didn't cry when she found out. That surprised even her. Lowell Ashby had been her husband for 19 years, and when the woman whose entire adult life had been built beside this man, finally opened the email that wasn't meant for her eyes, she simply sat very still at the kitchen island, set her reading glasses down with both hands, and looked out at the garden she had planted herself the summer their daughter turned 3. The tomatoes needed watering. That was the thought that came. Not how could he, not how long. Just, the tomatoes need water, and someone should do it before the afternoon heat sets in. Her name was Cecily Ashby. Cecily Brandt before the wedding. A name she sometimes missed the way you miss a coat you gave away before you realized winters were getting colder. She was 44 years old. She ran the Brandt Family Foundation, which her grandmother had built from the ruins of a textile fortune, and which Cecily had quietly grown into one of the most respected philanthropic organizations in the mid-Atlantic. She wore her dark hair short now, a decision she'd made at 40 that her husband had never quite stopped mentioning. She was not the kind of woman people described as warm. They said formidable and precise, and occasionally behind her back. A lot. She took it as a compliment. Lowell, by contrast, was the kind of man who made friends in elevator rides. He was an architect, gifted, genuinely, in the way that made it impossible to be properly angry at him for the first decade of their marriage, because she kept walking into beautiful buildings he'd designed and forgetting everything else. He was 51 now and had the easy confidence of a man who had never seriously doubted his own likability. He coached their daughter's soccer team for 3 years running, even after their daughter had aged out of caring about soccer. He remembered everyone's coffee order. He laughed too loudly in restaurants in a way that Cecily found embarrassing and that everyone else seemed to find charming. His email password had been their cat's name since 2009. He'd asked her to check something in his calendar 6 weeks ago, and she'd never logged out. She hadn't snooped. She wanted that on record, in her own mind at least. She had opened his laptop to forward herself a contractor estimate he'd forgotten to send, and the inbox was already open, and the name Renata appeared 14 times on the first visible screen. She was a forensic accountant by training, not by practice but by instinct. She did not read in a panic. She read carefully from the oldest email forward the way you build a case. It had been going on for 2 years and 4 months. The woman's name was Renata Solis. She was 31. She was a junior partner at the landscape architecture firm that Lowell's company had collaborated with on a waterfront development project in Baltimore. In the emails she called him L, and he called her Ren, and they had a shorthand that made Cecily's stomach turn, not because of the intimacy, but because of how effortless it looked. How fluent. This was not a man stumbling through something he was ashamed of. This was a man who had built a second language, and she'd become native in it. She forwarded herself nothing. She closed the laptop exactly as she had found it. She went outside and watered the tomatoes. The annual Brandt Foundation Gala was in 11 days. Cecily had organized it every year for a decade. It was held at the Willowmere Estate, a property her grandmother had bequeathed to the foundation in 1987, and it drew 300 guests, senators, hospital directors, the kind of old money that moved quietly, and the kind of new money that announced itself in the seating chart. It was the one night per year that Cecily allowed herself to be photographed without her usual resistance, because the foundation needed the visibility, and she understood that. Lowell always attended. He was charming at these events in the way that benefited her professionally, and she had been honest with herself about that transactional calculus long before any of this. His firm had designed 2 of the foundation's satellite offices. His name appeared in their annual report. They were, in the parlance of their social world, a unit. She did not tell him what she knew. She went to bed at her usual hour and made coffee in the morning and asked about his Thursday site visit to Richmond and listened to his answer. She was a forensic accountant by instinct. You don't tip your hand during discovery. What she did, quietly, over the following 10 days, she called her attorney. Not the family lawyer who had done their wills and their daughter Becca's college trust, but Hannah Oakake, a woman she had met at a conference in 2019 who did matrimonial law with the calm precision of someone diffusing something. She called her CPA. She asked him, in language she kept deliberately vague, about the audit trail on 3 specific investment accounts that were technically joint, but that Lowell managed exclusively. The CPA called back in 48 hours. His voice was careful in a way that told her everything before he said a word. Lowell had been withdrawing from those accounts in increments small enough to evade automatic flags. Not dramatic sums. Never more than $18,000 at a time. But consistently quarterly for nearly 3 years. The total, when her CPA ran the complete picture, was just over $260,000. She sat with that number for a long time. She was not a woman who cried easily. But she sat at her grandmother's desk in the foundation office, the same desk her grandmother had used, small and dark, and scratched from decades, and she put her hands flat on the surface and breathed. Not because of the money. The money was recoverable. She had more than enough in accounts he didn't know existed, money she'd protected quietly, and without accusation, the way you carry an umbrella when the forecast is ambiguous. It was the duration. That was the thing. 3 years of consistent withdrawal. The relationship had started 2 years and 4 months ago, which meant he had been building his exit before he even met Renata. He had been planning out before he knew what he was planning toward. He had decided to leave behind, and he had started the paperwork before he had the reason. Hannah told her they had an excellent case. Financial misconduct, clear documentation, a forensic trail that would not require inference. She told Cecily she should file before he did, and that the timing of the gala might work in her favor. Public events created witnesses and timelines. Cecily thanked her and said she would be in touch by end of week. Then she called her daughter. Becca was 22, finishing a master's program in Boston, and she was the kind of young woman who took difficult news by going very quiet first, and then asking the most precise possible question. She got that from Cecily. She got her laugh from her father, which was the kind of thing Cecily could acknowledge, without it destroying her. Cecily told her only the minimum, that things with her father were complicated, that there would be changes, and that she wanted Becca to hear it from her first, and not from anyone else. Becca was quiet for 11 seconds, Cecily counted, and then she asked, "Are you okay?" "I will be," Cecily said. "I'm currently still in the logistics phase." Becca almost laughed. "Mom, only you." The morning of the gala, Lowell mentioned, over the coffee she'd made, at the table where they'd sat for 19 years, that he might need to step out briefly mid-evening to take a call from his Berlin contact, something about the permit timeline on a project she hadn't heard him mention before. Cecily said, "Of course." She said it without looking up from her newspaper. She had made certain arrangements. Her sister Margot had been told the broad strokes and had agreed to be present at the gala, steady and available, which was what Margot was best at. Hannah had reviewed Cecily's documentation one final time that morning and had said, with the particular satisfaction of a woman who enjoys a clean case, "You're ready." What Cecily had not planned, what no amount of preparation could have arranged, was Renata Solis arriving at the Willowmere Estate Gala as the +1 of a colleague from the landscape architecture firm. She saw her from across the room. She knew immediately, not from any photo she had found, but from the way Lowell moved when he registered the woman's entrance. He was standing 20 feet away in conversation with a hospital foundation director, and the almost imperceptible shift in his posture, the slight stiffening, then the deliberate over-relaxation, was the kind of tell you could only read after 19 years of marriage. Renata was lovely. Cecily registered this without drama. She was dark-haired and composed, and dressed in a deep green that suited her. She did not look like a woman who knew she was in the lion's den. She looked like a woman attending a professional event, which was, perhaps, what she believed she was doing. Cecily set down her champagne glass. She excused herself from her conversation with a state senator's wife. She walked not quickly, not with any of the urgency that lived behind her sternum, across the room toward the long windows overlooking the garden. She did not approach Lowell. She did not approach Renata. She found Margot. "She's here," Cecily said. Margot, who had spent 47 years reading her younger sister's face, looked at her for a long moment. "What do you need?" "I need you to stay close to me and not touch anything I don't hand you." Margot nodded once. "Done." The evening moved in the way these evenings move the dinner service. The remarks from the foundation board chair, the live auction that Cecily had organized. And that ran precisely on time because she had personally walked through the timeline with the auctioneer twice. She spoke from the podium for 6 minutes. She thanked the donors by name in the order she had memorized. She was composed and warm, and every person in the room who looked at her saw a woman entirely in command of her evening. She saw Lowell from the stage, watching her. There was something in his face she didn't have a name for. She saw Renata, 3 tables back, applauding with everyone else. She thanked the room and stepped down. At 9:47, she was standing near the East Terrace with her foundation's development director, a man named Garrison, who had been with them for 12 years, and who she would tell nothing tonight when Lowell appeared at her elbow. "You were wonderful," he said. "Thank you," she said. There was a pause that lasted perhaps 4 seconds, and that contained, she thought, the entire weight of what neither of them had said in weeks. "I'm going to step out for that call," he said. "I know," she said. She watched him go. She watched the direction he went, which was not toward the parking portico where phone reception was better. As he'd claimed last week was the reason he needed the outdoor space, but toward the garden path that curved behind the east wing. The same path she had walked alone at 16, the summer her grandmother first showed her this property. She gave it 8 minutes. Then she followed. She found them near the iron bench by the reflecting pool, the one her grandmother had installed in 1972, and that the foundation had repainted 3 times since. They were not embracing. They were standing close, speaking quietly, and Lowell had his hand on Renata's arm in the way that confirmed. For anyone who needed confirmation. Everything. Cecily stopped at a distance that was close enough to be undeniable, and far enough to be deliberate. Lowell saw her first. The color left his face in a way that was almost clinical to observe. Renata turned. There was a moment, a long one, longer than it had any right to be, in which no one said anything. The garden was lit by the warm spill of light from the estate windows, and somewhere inside the string quartet was still playing. "Cecily," Lowell said. His voice was very quiet. "I'm not here to make a scene," Cecily said. She was surprised, even now, by how even her voice was. "I'm here because I want you both to know that I know. I've known for some time. And I wanted to look at you while I said it, not across a conference table." Renata said nothing. She was very still. "I'm filing Monday morning," Cecily said. "Hannah O'Cake's office, the financial documentation is complete." She looked at Lowell directly. All of it, the withdrawals, the offshore routing, all of it. She watched him absorb that. "Cecily, I'm not angry," she said, which was not entirely true, but was true enough for tonight. "I'm done. There's a difference." She looked at Renata then. This was the part she had not rehearsed. "I don't know what he told you," she said. "But you should know. He started moving money 3 years ago, before you. I want you to have that information and do whatever you think is right with it." Renata's face shifted in a way that was hard to categorize. Not guilt, exactly. Something more complicated. Something that looked, in the garden light, a little like the specific horror of being handed a truth you had already been half suspecting, and hoping was wrong. "I'm going back inside," Cecily said. "This is still my event." She walked back up the garden path. She did not look behind her. Inside, she found Margot at the edge of the dance floor and accepted a glass of water from a passing server and said, very quietly, "Done." Margot put her hand on Cecily's arm. Not a question, just presence. The foundation's board chair found Cecily 20 minutes later and told her it was the best gala in memory, and that 3 donors had expressed interest in significant multi-year commitments off the back of her remarks. Cecily thanked him and meant it, and wrote down the names and amounts in the small notebook she kept in her evening bag. The string quartet played until 11. Lowell did not come back inside. At 11:15, a woman touched Cecily's arm, and when she turned, it was Renata, standing at the periphery of the room, alone, her evening bag held in both hands. "I owe you an apology," Renata said. Her voice was low. "He told me you'd been separated for over a year," Renata said. "He said you were working out the legal details," he said. "A lot of things." The silence between them was not comfortable, but it was honest. "I believe you," Cecily said. She meant it. That surprised her, too. "I'm not going to tell you what to do with that," Cecily added. "But you should get your own attorney, and I'd go back and look at anything he's signed with your firm in the last 2 years. Renata looked at her for a moment, and whatever she saw, it was enough. She nodded. She said, "Thank you," and she walked away, and Cecily watched her go with something that was not quite sympathy and not quite solidarity, but lived somewhere in that neighborhood. Monday morning, the way Monday mornings always do in October, gray and unceremonious, the kind of day that does not announce itself. Cecily was at Hannah's office at 9 sharp. She was wearing the same dark coat she'd worn to her grandmother's funeral, practical, unadorned, well-made, and she carried the folder of documentation she had assembled herself, cross-referenced, tabbed. Hannah looked at it and said, "This is almost too organized." "I'm aware," Cecily said. The filing took 90 minutes. Hannah's paralegal made copies of everything. They discussed the timeline, the likelihood of a contested discovery process, the specific accounts that would be frozen pending the financial misconduct claim. Before she left, Hannah said, "You know, most people come in here devastated. You're the most functional client I've had in 20 years. Cecily considered that. "I was devastated," she said. "I just didn't do it in your office." It unfolded as these things do over months. Not in a single dramatic afternoon, but in increments. The freeze on the joint accounts, the deposition, the moment when Lowell's own attorney sat across a conference table and went visibly pale at the forensic accounting report. The settlement was favorable. More than favorable. Hannah called it exceptional given the asset complexity, and Hannah was not a woman who used that word casually. The Brandt Foundation's next annual report listed no architects by name in the acknowledgments for the first time in a decade. The design credits were updated. The 2 satellite offices remained standing and remained beautiful, and Cecily walked through them occasionally and thought, the work is not the man. Becca came home for Thanksgiving, and they cooked together in the kitchen where the tomatoes once grew, and Becca asked how she was feeling, and Cecily said, "Better," which was the truth, which was something. "Do you miss him?" Becca asked. Cecily thought about it honestly. "I miss who I thought he was for the first 10 years, she said. "The second 10, I think I knew something was missing. I just didn't let myself count it." Becca was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's actually really sad, Mom." "I know," Cecily said. "Pass me the time." The following spring, the Brandt Foundation announced its largest single grant in its 40-year history, a $12 million commitment to affordable housing initiatives across 3 states. At the press conference, Cecily stood at a podium in front of a room full of journalists and city officials and said what her grandmother had once told her. That money is not interesting in itself. It is only interesting in what it builds. A reporter afterward asked her what had driven the expansion this year specifically. She thought about a garden bench by a reflecting pool. She thought about a kitchen island and a pair of reading glasses set down with 2 hands. She thought about her grandmother's desk and the particular way a well-organized folder can feel like armor. "I've had a clarifying year," she said. The reporter wrote it down. She walked back to her car in the April light, and she did not look back, because there was nothing behind her, worth turning around. All of it, only in front of her. The work and the years and the foundation her grandmother built, and she had kept, and would keep, and intended to make last.